Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today I have a something interesting for you here. It is another deck video, and similarly to the last couple deck videos, this is a deck that, might not necessarily be the, sort of the meta lists that you see in a lot of on ladder, but I definitely think it can stand up toe-to-toe with them, so if you're looking for something different to play rather than just simply the meta, what everyone else is playing, this is definitely a deck to check out, and again, like I said in the Sherman Italy video, where I said I think that deck has like real tournament possibility, more so than the first deck, the Soviet German deck, which definitely has like a couple of weaknesses and would probably just slot in worse than some of the other cards you could be running. Well, this one, I think, is the best out of this sort of series of United Front decks. I think this one is... I would immediately bring this to a tournament if I were playing in any upcoming tournaments. So if anybody watching this is playing in any upcoming tournaments, keep that in mind. What I am talking about is Japan-France Mill. And just hearing that, I'm sure a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and be like, okay, well, like, yeah, Mill, whatever. Like, we've seen it before, and, it's been played in tournament before, it has its place, but in general, it's kind of, rock, paper, scissors, it gets destroyed by some decks, destroys other decks, whatever. This deck, let me check my stats, and this isn't exact, but I know for a fact I've only lost 2 games on this. There was a couple, like, disconnects and desyncs, which I'm not counting. But, like, actually played games, I have 2 losses, and the actually played wins of just beating another deck on ladder, I think is around 28, give or take 3. So it is well over a 90% win rate after about 30 games. And that's not just, like, playing against random garbage. That is against people on Jur France. That is against half a dozen Jur France, more than half a dozen Aggro. That's against Ramp, that's against Brit German control, that's against Soviet Italy control, lots of Soviet Italy controls. Those ones are very decisive victories. This is into other Mill, this is into heavy Ramp. Like, not only would this deck be really good in a tournament, this deck's also just really good on ladder, because you're absolutely annihilating all of the heavy garbage that you often lose to on other decks. So let's take a look at what this deck is. What does it do differently to Mill decks? A lot of this is sort of the similar, what you expect from Mill decks, particularly the France package, but what does Japan have that makes this deck so good? Because Japan right now is arguably the weakest main nation, at least in terms of the variety of decks that you can reasonably play in standard. It's there with US, but I think it's Japan or US. So Japan, especially Japan control, is something that we really haven't seen since they nerfed island defense. So what are we cooking with in this deck? So let's again start from the cheapest cards here. We have 2 copies of Out of the Mist. This is just a very, very good card at dealing with Aggro, because Aggro's the only deck that can really go under you, and of the 2 losses that I have on this deck, both were to Aggro. One was to just, like, high roll Aggro, and the other one was to a slightly more traditional Japan-German aggro that did run a burn package. And both of them basically just drew excellently. And they were actually both very close games. But, of course, the deck did eventually lose. But I've absolutely annihilated, like, probably 7 or 8 other just, like, normal Aggros, who, like, some drew poorly, some drew well. I drew poorly, I drew well. This deck is not bad into Aggro. It is actually, I think, favorable into Aggro, and part of that is 2 copies of Out of the Mist. And, of course, in other matchups, this is just going to be good. Honestly, it's a card that you often just use as a... in combination with another unit, or another card that was going to be destroying the unit anyways, as just, like, a 1-credit salvage a unit. Sometimes you're using this on your own units, which actually happens fairly frequently, and we'll get to some of the cards that you want to be salvaging yourself with this. But against, like, Germany, France, you can, like, pick up Panzer Grenadiers as just, like, an extra thing to throw on the board, make them deal with. Sometimes you can pick up, like, an Engineers for a little bit more healing against Soviet control. This is really just, like, a tech card, because Japan's cards are so weak that the best Japan cards are cards that sort of let you take other cards from other decks, because they're probably better than yours. So Out of the Mist sort of serves that double function of being just like a really good anti-Aggro tool, but as well as it's going to get some good value out of, in a control matchup that you might not really get out of other similar anti-Aggro cards, such as like Through the Breach or Sudden Strike. Then we have, we'll skip Air, Land, and Sea and circle back to this. We have 58th Infantry Regiment, 3 copies of this. This is just a very, very versatile tool. Again, it's very good against German, France, and Aggro early in the game because it's just 2 credits, just hit something in the front line for 3 damage with shock. That's probably going to kill anything in the first 2 or 3 turns of the game. So just essentially 2 credits, destroy something in the front line, and then you keep a 1-2 body. It's actually kind of similar to Radiant Brigade in that respect, where you're playing it relatively cheap, it's destroying something, and then it's leaving a not amazing body, but a body that's certainly going to be there for the opponent to have to deal with. And then against control, like, again, this is just a guy you can throw up early in the game, especially against ramp, where you can just sort of get it out of your hand. Also, once you're, like, doing the multiple compromises later in the game, and just, like, flooding both players' hands, this is just a really cheap guy to get out of your hand, so that you don't overdraw yourself while you continue to play compromises. So all around, just a very, very good card. Then we have to commit the reserves, and there's no self-credit denial synergy in this deck. There's no 1 roofs, there's no jakes. This is just simply 2 credit, destroy a unit. You can use this early in the game if there's something that's really important that you have to kill. But generally speaking, you just use this at around like turn 10, turn 12 as just like, you know, you're against control, and control is going to have so many threats, and you're just going to simply 2 credits, remove it, and then go back to playing compromises. Desperate Measures, this one's self-explanatory. Kurume Regiment, this is just another really good card that, yes, there's a lot of suppress right now. A lot of decks have access to suppress. So sometimes you're going to play Kurume and then they suppress it and then you just trade it into something. But if they don't have suppress, Kurume buys you so much time. And even if they do have suppress, it sort of forces them to use it. And there's a couple other units in their deck that are suppress targets. So generally speaking, you either want no suppress targets or you want enough suppress targets that they can't suppress everything. And this deck is certainly leaning into the enough suppressed targets that they can't suppress everything that they want. Then we have Honor and Loyalty. This is just the mill classic. You shuffle a card into the deck. What's actually really good about this is there's a lot of sort of hyper aggro high roll decks right now with the Type 92, where they're running a lot of stuff like supply shipments and the USOS. And essentially, they're just trying to make like a 10-10 unit on turn 3. And a lot of decks can't really deal with that. Honor and Loyalty is just really good on those. Obviously, of course, it's also good at just milling your opponent, forcing them to draw cards. It's 3 credits. You don't have to deal with a big threat immediately. You can get it off the board. Oftentimes, you can force mill it later in the game. It's just an excellent card. On the Ascent, another just really good card. It's essentially just an AoE. It can be sometimes annoying to get salvage units out of your hand. So that's like something to keep in mind, but you know, it's obviously still an excellent card that you're absolutely going to run. And even later in the game, if there's only 1 unit on the board, it's just 3 credits, destroy and salvage a unit, which is good. Radiant Brigade, self-explanatory. 77th Regiment, this card is so good at just absolutely slowing down aggro decks and mid-range decks. This guy is an absolute beast at just, you know, deal 3 damage to something in the front line, you shock attack, so you keep the 3-4, and you summon the 2-2 guy that they now have to deal with. And it's so important. And it's such a powerful card that oftentimes this is what gets suppressed, because they just don't want you getting more free 2-2 guards. And then that will allow later in the game stuff like your Kurume regiments or the 2 Takasagi regiments in this deck to go unsuppressed. And Takasagi is just, you know, sometimes it's going to get suppressed. If they don't suppress it, it just slows them down. And then the discard is going to be very good. And you might think discard has anti-synergy with mill because it's reducing their hand size. But it's actually perfectly fine because it's going to allow you to force them to draw more with Phony Wars, which we'll get to in a second. And obviously, the reason to mill your opponent is to stop them from getting access to the cards. Because if the card is overdrawn, they don't get to play it. And that's the exact same thing as discarding the opponent. So obviously, if your opponent has 9 cards in hand and will overdraw naturally at the start of their turn, that's not a great time to trade off a Takasagi. But if your opponent has like 8 cards in hand, you know, the Takasagi is the equivalent of the overdrawing whatever card you discard. So I've seen people argue that Takasagi has anti-synergy with mill. That's absolutely not the case. It has great synergy with mill. And Takasagi is one of those guys that you might consider out of the Mistin, where you out of the Mistin, you're on Takasagi, you trade it into something, destruction triggers, they discard a card, then you replay the 1-1 guard Takasagi, and you now are going to discard a second card. On the Ascent is also great for that if you on the Ascent your own Takasagi. Then we have Call to the Colonies. This is rounding out the last 2 French card slots of 4 Honor and Loyalty, 4 Compromise, 2 Phony War. 2 Call to the Colony, just a little bit of extra health is useful. In the 30 games I've played, I've never had to draw with these cards. I could imagine a world where you might need to draw 2, but in the 30 games I've played heal 8 every time it's come up. Just, you kind of want the heal 8. Then we have 4 Compromise. This card is absolutely insane, and you generally want to keep Compromise in your opening hand if you see it in the mulligan. You don't want to keep multiple copies, and obviously you are looking for other things, and if you're against Japan specifically, I might not keep it, but you are going to keep Compromise in your mulligan a lot. Phony War is another really good card. This is going to help you refill your own hand if your hand is just a lot of answers, because as you look through this deck is a lot of answers. But Phony War is also going to be able to force your opponent to draw a little bit. You use it differently depending on the matchup. If you're playing against a slow control deck that might not have a lot of their own card draw, then you are going to want to hold on to Phony War and use it much more offensively at waiting until their hand starts to get a little small and then force them to draw a bunch of cards. If you're playing against a deck that is going to be drawing a lot of cards and playing cards much more quickly, Phony War you're often using as just refilling your own hand for answers later, and it's like perfectly fine if you draw your opponent 1 card and you draw yourself like 5 cards because your opponent will have played like 3 expansions already or something like that. So Phony War, a very useful card. Also, the reason there's 2, I know a lot of mill decks only run 1, and a lot of mill decks only need to run 1. Japan, you absolutely want to run 2, because 1, just look at how many 1-cost cards are in this deck. And there's no, like, glamour boys. If you can't really afford to have no cards in hand for multiple turns, like Brit Mill can sometimes do. Japan Mill, you always want to be sitting at around 7 cards in hand yourself. So 2 Phony Wars works well for that. And the second thing is you could use it offensively to close out the game quicker once your opponent has no cards left in deck and you just force them to Phony War. Once they start hand dumping with their last breaths to try to close out the game, you could just like Phony War, they take like, 40 damage of fatigue. Then we get to the 388th Independent, and this is the big reason to play Japan Mill. This guy is so useful. It's just 5 credits deal 6 damage to the front line. That's really, really good in a lot of matches. That's just going to be 5 credits destroy something in the front line a lot of the time, and it forces them to draw a card, which is 4 additional forced draws on your opponent. Most Mill only actually have 4 forced draw in the form of Honor and Loyalty, because Honor and Loyalty shuffles 1 card into their deck, and then they draw 2, so they net draw 1 card. Compromise draws both players equally, and Phony War can be used to force the opponent to draw more cards than it forces you to draw, but it depends how it's being used, and it can be different on different matches. So sometimes, like, say, a Brit France Mill might actually lose in fatigue because you've only forced your opponent to draw 4 extra cards, and then you're playing stuff like Monty, and maybe you have to Royal Research into Radar to, get some healing in there, and that's another draw, and then in the end, they're only like 2 cards deeper in fatigue than you, and that's not enough. So that can certainly happen sometimes in this deck, but Independent is a 4 additional forced draws, and because the mill package is so powerful, this is, realistically, you are reaching fatigue. Your opponent will reach fatigue, like, 95% of the time if they're playing against this deck. Win or lose, they will probably reach fatigue 95% of the time. So this guy is just, like, extra burst damage on the burn. So, if you're in a game where you force them to draw 3 additional cards on top of what they normally would have had to reach fatigue, that's like the difference. Instead of drawing into 3 fatigue, where it's 1, 2, 3, you're taking 6 damage total of fatigue damage, it will instead have also drawn 4, 5, 6, and that's 21 damage of fatigue damage. So that can be the difference of like 15 damage. And, like, drawing into 7. Like, that can drastically cut down the number of turns your opponent will have to kill you in general, because your opponent is really on a clock. You are going to try to force them to draw cards with all of the cards in your deck, and kill them with fatigue. That's the only way you win this game. So that gives your opponent a fixed number of total turns they will have access to in the game, and the Independent is going to drastically reduce that, while just taking out a big unit in the process. And also certain matchups, sometimes you just like throw this up as a big guy to force them to do stuff. Like Ramp, where they'll try to sit back for a while, not do a lot of things, and then start hitting you with bombers. You could just like throw up an Independent, and that guy's just going to farm a Glamour Boys, he's going to stick around, it's going to be annoying, it might bait them into doing a B24J to suppress it, rather than doing the B24D for damage. And if that happens, you're absolutely happy with that. Independent, absolutely insane card. Then we have 2 Blade of the Samurai, which is just, I mean, a lot of you probably haven't seen this card before. It's 6 credits, destroy unit. That's just because you want more removal in this deck, and there's like some other weird stuff you could run. Like you could run Amphibious Assaults. Obviously, it is much more niche, but it is cheaper. You could run stuff like I don't remember the name of the card, so I'll have to scroll to a manual. The Command Failure, you can run Command Failure. I tried Command Failure in this deck a little bit. There's just, like, certain decks just do not have units that will have less attack than defense. Like, you know, Joe France and Aggro are, for example, there's not a lot of units that this is really going to apply to. So, Blade of the Samurai, you just want extra hard removal. Like, honestly, this deck would be so much worse without Blade of the Samurai, because Control has the number of the amount of threat removal in this deck is really just perfect to match the heaviest decks that you're going to see realistically on ladder. And what's also excellent about this is oftentimes, once they realize that you mill, Blitz Doctrine's players will just pick the biggest thing they find off of Blitz Doctrine. So oftentimes that's going to mean that they're going to be playing down like a 12-12 King Tiger or like a 14-12 Mouse or something like that. They're going to be playing down this huge unit that is way too big to kill with Trading Into with Independence. It has too much attack to actually kill with Commit the Reserves. And it will be, like, late enough into the game that they'll have, like, gotten out all of your auto and loyalties. And then it's just like, well, I'm just going to drop a Blade of the Samurai. It's just really good to have that extra windfall of hard removal for threats, even if it's not great into aggro. If you look at the curve of this deck, you know, you're going to be fine into aggro. Like, having a couple 6-cost cards is not going to be the end of the world. And then the 2 remaining cards in the deck, the 7 and the 8, are Bonsai and To the Last Man. These are very straightforward. These are just big AoE board clears. You are going to want to find these over the course of the game. They're going to help you deal with the threats that your opponents do draw and not the ones that they overdraw. Because really how this deck works is you're going to overdraw around, like, you know, let's say 5 to 10 cards of your opponent's deck. That still leaves them with, like, okay, 5 might be a bit low. You're going to overdraw, like, around 8 to 10 cards of your opponent's deck. That still leaves them with about 30 cards that they're going to have to play against you. And you have to be able to absorb those 30 cards that they're going to play without you dying. So you want AoE, you want removal, you get the healing from Compromises and Call to the Colonies, and really you just sit back, absorb punches, try to remove stuff efficiently while milling them cards. How much you want to rely on removing stuff immediately, how much you want to sort of wait out to try to get more values out of your board clear, how much you want to focus on milling them every card that they can above all else. Really depends on the matchup. Control, you're going to want to focus on milling more than immediate threat removal, because Control's probably going to have a hard time rushing you down. So if you're able to mill a threat that they would be able to otherwise draw, while leaving a threat on board for a turn, that's perfectly fine if they hit you for like 5 or 6 damage, at the cost of losing like another big unit you would otherwise have to remove. And now let's get to the last 3 cards that we have not mentioned yet, Air, Land, and Sea. And this card is such a difference maker. And at first glance, you're like, why do you run this card? Like, this card just seems bad. Like, lose a credit slot, there's no payoff. And sure, if you can reach 12 credits, you know, the loser credit slot doesn't actually matter, because it's losing the same credit slot that you're spending on this. And then you just regain it the next turn, going back to 12, the maximum. So, like, you know, at 12 credits, Air, Land, and Sea is just 1 credit, develop a card in your deck. The issue is, before that, it is not that. Against aggro, it can be really, really bad. If you draw, like, 2 Air, Land, and Seas by, like, turn 6, they're basically dead cards. You're very rarely going to be playing an Air, Land, and Sea prior to, like, turn 10 or so. Now, very rarely does not mean never. There's sometimes where you're against Aggro and they've dumped the entire hand onto the board and they're doing their final push, and you don't have your Desperate Measures, so you drop an Air, Land, and Sea to look for Desperate Measures. And, you know, it's a very good card at finding a specific tool you might need in a moment. And aggro can definitely push you into a situation where you will be fine losing the credit slot in the mid-game, because it will give you the card that lets you absolutely annihilate any threat their deck has. At least for, like, the foreseeable future. However, it is in those control matches where Air, Land, and Sea becomes so important, because it is essentially 3 extra mill cards. It essentially lets you run 3 extra Compromise, or 3 extra Honor and Loyalty, or sometimes it will let you run 2 to the last man. It lets you just get access to more cards in your deck. This deck is so well refined in just all of the cards you want are in it. Airland and Sea allows you to just run additional copies of the cards that are in this deck, and if you look, most of the cards in this deck are max copies. The only difference is, or the only things that aren't max copies are Call of the Colonies, and that's because we are out of France slots, and then Out of the Mist and 58th Infantry, and that's just because these are anti-aggro tech tools. Everything else is max slots, so Airland and Sea is just get an additional one, and Develop is a copy. So that's why you get a second one. So if there is a compromise left in your deck and you play Airland and Sea, you just got a 5th compromise to your hand. And also, it's not a draw card. So you have added a 5th compromise to your hand without actually drawing anything from your deck. And it's also diluting your opponent's knowledge of what cards you have or haven't played. Something that you will do often is Airland and Sea on, turn 11, pick to the last man, and then play to the last man on turn 18, and then your opponent thinks, okay, he doesn't have to the last man anymore, I'm going to flood the board, and then you play a second to the last man on turn 20. Oftentimes you'll catch your opponents by surprise with that, and this card is just so good. Yes, if you play this deck, you will have times where it feels awkward, and if you actually camped everything up, you have Desperate Measures to commit the reserves, 3 Airland and Seas. That's 6 cards that deny you credits, and then also you might Airland and Sea into a Desperate Measures or into a Commit the Reserves for additional credit loss. So you might be wondering, well, why? That seems like a lot of credit loss. That seems like it could start to be a bit of a problem. But again, if you look at the curve of this deck, most of the things in this deck are 3 and 4 cost. So really, you only need around 7 or 8 credits on most turns. And that's going to let you do the Honor and Loyalty Compromise type of turns, or the Independent and a Commit the Reserves type of turns. You don't need a lot of credits in this deck. You're not often using all of your credits, even once you get up to 12. So stagnating at around 10 is kind of fine. And then you might be wondering, well, if you're running all these cards, well, why don't you run One Roof? Even not even as a 3 of, but just as run 1 or 2 One Roofs. And the answer is you just don't need them. Credits are not enough of an issue that the only times credits are an issue is in the early game, and that's when you can't use One Roof, because you will not have denied yourself enough credits for it to actually give you credit positive, and if you have, then you are in a very, very big issue that a 1 extra credits in, a turn is going to help you. And then the other issue is in Control, where you're going to, over the course of the game, deny yourself, 6 credit slots, and then One Roof is going to be, 5 credits gain 12 credits, draw 2 cards, and that's really, really good. But the thing is, you don't want to draw the cards, because that just defeats the purpose of your deck. And then the other issue is you just don't ever have a turn where you're I need to spend 20 credits worth of stuff on this turn, on turn 20. That's never a point in the game, because you're answering stuff as it comes out, so there's a very limited amount that your opponent is able to put on the board at once, and even if they are able to drop a bunch of threats and you don't have to the last man, you can still do Honor and Loyalty, Commit the Reserves, Blade of the Samurai for 11 credits. So you just don't need One Roof. And other than that, there's not a lot of other honorable mentions in this deck. There's some French cards that I think are really fun. I'm a huge fan of Chasseurs. Étranger is pretty cool in a mill deck. The issue is these are absolutely the 12 best French cards in this deck, no questions asked. So you can't really add any other French cards to this deck. And then Japanese cards still kind of suck for doing anything control-wise, so there's nothing I really want to put into this deck. Home defense doesn't have great synergy because you're always going to be really high health from compromise, and it's a very niche situation where you are getting aggressed down. And it's just a big stat thing. If you just want to make this deck heavier, you could run Home Defense. Storm Dragon, there are ways of killing this yourself on your turn with Commit the Reserves, but it's not easy. There's not a lot of big fighters going around to sack this into to trigger it immediately. And you can push it to the front line, but then it could get suppressed. Storm Dragon just seems a lot of effort for an effect that you're not going to need a lot of the time. And then the other thing, Winter Regiments is Winter Regiment is a very good card, but you just really don't need it. You already have the Independent for 5 cost, blitz into something big in the front line. You don't really want to salvage more stuff to your hand because it's just going to fill up hand slots and be difficult to get rid of. The opponent is already finding it difficult to stick stuff in the front line because you run the 3 copies of the 58th and 2 copies of the 77th. Then the other card that I'd consider is the Cheeto, just because you do run, the 5 shock attack guys. This guy can help get them a little bit higher. I'm much closer to running Cheeto than I am Winter Regiment, but again, I just don't think the deck really needs it. Like, the only losses I have on the deck is to hyper aggro high rolling, and Cheeto's not going to help in that. Winter Regiment's not going to help in that. Home defense maybe helps in that. Storm Dragon certainly doesn't. And then, is there anything else? Like, Under Fire's fine, but it just doesn't really accomplish enough on its own. Command Failure, you're going to have units to target it, same with Amphibious Assault, but are they better than the cards in this deck? Absolutely not. Because that's the thing, is there's not really any, like, flex cards. Like, the flex cards are probably the anti-aggro stuff, like the 58s at the end of the Mists, but there's just nothing better to put into the deck to replace them. An earlier draft of this deck, I did run Diplomatic Attachés, and this has some synergy with Air, Land, and Sea, but it's just not worth the 4 card slots you have to put in, because you have to commit to all of these if you're going to run it. So, yeah, that is the deck list. There's really nothing I would change if you have all of these cards. If you don't have all of these cards, obviously some of the things I mentioned that you could run are like the Amphibious Assaults and Command Failures for a bit more removal. And, Home Defense is just like a beefy card to throw in the deck if you're missing some of the top end, or something like that. But yeah, all around, that is the deck. I know I've been talking about this deck for quite a bit now, over 25 minutes of just talking about this deck. So, that is the breakdown. That obviously you can reference this for explaining why I have certain cards in the deck, or how to play certain cards in the deck, in case they don't come up in the sample size. But now, let's switch from talking about the deck to actually playing the deck and talking through some of the lines on the deck. So, with that, let's start queuing up on ladder. And once again, just to show, it is early season, to be fair, but there's a lot of people grinding. I hit Field Marshal. I started playing this deck shortly after hitting Field Marshal, so basically 2,000 points. And again, I've lost 2 games on this deck. This deck is performing very, very well, so I'm currently in the top 50. And I'm about to actually hit level 400 Japan, which is part of the reason I started recording now. So let's queue up some games, get a good sample of the games, hopefully, and then yeah, that'll be that. So let's roll the intro and get into the first game.
What a performance there by J-King.
J-King, full plot armor.
J-King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J-King is our world champion! J-King 7! What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!
Alright, our first game is going to be against Britain, and that was a very fast mulligan from our opponent, keeping 3 cards. So it's probably Brit Air, which would be more problematic. If this is Brit Germany control, or like Brit France mill, this should be a very, very easy win. If it is Brit Air, that can get a little problematic for us, just because Brit Air, the bombers don't have to deal with these Blitz infantry. Turn 1 pass, though, very, very good sign for us. It's going to be Brit Finland. Alright, probably a control salvage type deck. This should be perfectly fine. That guy's a little annoying, so let's get rid of him. The MEBF actually could be a bit of an issue if he is able to stick one of those guys at any point this game. Something that takes a little getting used to on Mill is it feels really awkward playing stuff like Compromise and Ottoman Loyalty if you're going second early in the game, because it won't be remotely close to actually milling your opponent. You'll just be drawing them cards. But that's the issue, or that's just something that you're going to face in this deck, is if your opponent has a small hand size, very few decks are going to, greatly inflate that hand size, especially as soon as they see France ally. I'm thinking of just playing on the Ascent here. Just gets these guys off the board. Also might be Ultra. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So, essentially, you have to go through a bit of the growing pains of getting your opponent's hand size up. And that's the thing, is with how many cards in their own deck that are going to draw them cards, and then how many cards you'll be drawing them each turn. It does start to become an issue, and it reaches a point where it just becomes overwhelming, and you are net drawing them cards every turn. Their hand size is increasing. It's just if you go second, it might not be increasing as fast as you were comfortable with, but it takes a little bit of experience just to realize that you're going to get there eventually. They're going to start milling cards. You just have to play stuff like auto and loyalties and compromises to get them there. Now, the other thing in this deck is you have to make room in your own hand. You can afford to overdraw, but you would rather not. So just effectively lowering your own hand size to prepare for those compromise turns later in the game, and also not leaving stuff up to chance of, like, if compromise draws me into, like, an out of the mist, then I can, like, keep my hand size at 8 cards. We're giving him the salvage on this because it ends his turn to salvage it. So it, as we see, it leaves our opponent here at exactly 8 cards in hand. And now we can start milling him. And here's always an interesting thing of using honor and loyalties and compromises, is if you honor and loyalty first, there is a slight chance, of course, that he will draw it on the first card. And if you compromise first, it could increase the odds that it gets milled. So you do want to consider, like, how important is Glamour Boys? Is Glamour Boys better than the average card in his deck? Glamour Boys is probably better than the average card in his deck. So because of that, we will compromise first here, just so he doesn't immediately draw it. Now, he would actually get one more draw to overdraw it if we had done it in the other order. Interception on the honor and loyalty. That's actually quite bad. I mean, like, look at our health total. We're chilling. And, I mean, we're probably just going to run that back again. Compromise, and now he's not holding up a credit for the honor and loyalty. And the overdraw start overdraws a Glamour Boys and a detached battalion. And a number 9 commander. So not great hits. The Glamour Boys is very good. The detached battalion, probably not doing a whole lot. Our opponent going for synthetic rubber. That's not really going to accomplish a whole lot of anything. Now, I could compromise here, force him to overdraw a couple cards. That is going to force us to overdraw as well, though. So I think I'd rather just go for the 58th. And we're, like, at the point where I think we can drop an airland and see. We're at 9 credits. He's not putting us under any pressure. Probably take the commit the reserves. Normally, you're looking for mill in a control matchup like this. So, we're going to overdraw him another card. Oxen Bucks. And sure, he could salvage it, but adds a card to his hand. Then he can throw it out for cheap, but, you know, we're not taking a lot of damage from these guys at the moment, and we're eventually going to draw into something like a Desperate Measures or a Bonsai. Well, we start. He's on 8 cards, we're on 8 cards. Let's compromise. Overdraw a second interception. I could Takasagi. There's a pretty decent chance to be able to salvage it. I don't think he could salvage it and also suppress it. The other option here is to go for Airland and Sea. I mean, obviously we can Airland, Sea, and Takasagi. You don't need extra Phony Wars unless your hand size is very small and you don't have one in hand. So I'll probably just take the Independent here. and drop down a Takasagi. That's the other nice thing about this deck, is if both of your hands are full, there's no, like, sort of main card in your deck. Like, obviously, To the Last Man is an elite, and can be very useful and a hard effect to duplicate if you don't duplicate To the Last Man. But there's no, like, sort of singular win condition in the type that, like, front formation might be, like, a very singular win condition. So this is very awkward. We'd love to have a Desperate Measures. I'm thinking of just Independent into Detached Battalion, and then Takasagi into Kurume. The question is, do I want to play my other Kurume first? And I think the answer is no. I think we just take this trade now. Like, again, we're under next to no pressure. We're through most of our healing. We only have one compromise, which we could duplicate left in the deck, so we do want to keep a little eye on our health. But also, it's like Finland is not going to have huge burst. There's no front formations down the line. Okay, Baker Street Irregulars here does add a card to his hand. Parachute. And we still don't find any of our Boyd clears here. It's kind of getting a little silly. So let's start with an air land and see. There's the Desperate Measures. And is Desperate Measures here better than Honor and Loyalty? Yeah, probably. So let's wipe the board. Push this up to the front line. And we don't really need to play any more cards. Like, I could Blade of the Samurai this. I think that there's going to be better uses for that in this matchup. Hopefully at this point he's not going to be able to build these wide boards. Wide boards are definitely more frustrating to deal with than tall boards. Just because, you know, looking at my hand now, I have 4 pieces of single target removal. Commando Raid probably got that off of the Baker Street Irregulars. I doubt he is a Commandos deck. But those guys actually need to go, because he might be able to try to burn me out with these guys. So hopefully we find a Bonsai soon. This would be a very good opportunity to play a Bonsai. Another Independent is fine. I'd like to avoid getting Independent and Takasagi on the board at the same time, if possible. Just because I don't want to give him another White Death. I think we actually go for Kurume. This way he can't go for too much order spam, or else he risks just immediately ending his turn. And it also might bait out the White Death, and then we get Takasagi to trigger. Okay, co-belligerence on our Independence, so that's going to force some draws. It adds to his deck to negate his fatigue, and then it's going to force me to draw, which adds to my fatigue. And Black Prince. Again, Bonsai draw would be nice. To the Last Man would be slightly less useful. We're going to drop a Blade of the Samurai on this. This is probably one of the bigger units in his deck. And I don't think Britain-Finland is probably not going to be making any units outside of Commit the Reserves range. If he's running Finnish Boys, I wonder if his hand's starting to get filled up with the infantry shock draw guys. Because presumably he's running that if he's running Finnish Boys and Finland. I mean, maybe he's just running this for the guard body. The shock guys don't have any salvage synergy, and he does seem to be a bit of a salvage deck. He might actually have... Okay, there's the natural Desperate Measures. He might have the... No, finish countermeasures there. And we have gotten out of sync. So hopefully that is able to be resolved immediately. Okay, so looks like the desperate measures went through. Us attacking with the independent did not. And he got a second co-belligerent, so now he has 2 independents. And Commando off of the other Baker Street, so that's a little unfortunate. We pick up the bonsai. Don't really need to play it anymore this game. Or not this game. We don't need to play it anymore on this board, I should say. What are the over-under on him having Doubting System? I could Phony Ward now. It draws him 2 cards, draws me 2 cards. I think we can wait. Because he has the 2 independents, I'm a little more cognizant of the fact that this is not going to be as much of a like free mill win as, you know, it might have been in the past. Yeah, this seems like a pretty good bonsai. It does get Doubting Systemed. So let's just clear out the front line. Do we want to save out of the mist for anything? I could use it now to get a Glamour Boys. I could use it now to clean up Commando to avoid taking any additional damage from it. I could save it to salvage the Independence. Rescue Mission on Finish Boys. Okay. Rescue Mission was not a card I was expecting. I think we're going to hold on to this. Especially now that he has Rescue Mission, it's going to make Phony Ward drawing him a little harder. Okay, there's the first of our independents. I think we just salvage it. Draws us a card. Pick up an Honor and Loyalty. That will be useful. And actually, let's just play Takasaki. I'm going to save the Raiding Brigade. I just remembered that he has the 2 Finish Boys in hand, so there's going to be some higher value targets for this. We have a Compromise and To the Last Man left in deck as well. So we're not under too much pressure. I guess I could have, like, immediately forced the draw. So he could have second Doubting System. That would be absolutely wild if he does. Phony Ward draws us both 3 here. It's a little risky, but we have a bunch of forced draws on top of that, so that's going to close out this health gap quite a bit. And okay, hopefully there's no finish countermeasures. And we'll actually out of the mist this. Again, just so we have more of these forced draws. It also seems like he's only really going to be coming at us from the support line. Overdraw the other independent is huge. And we should be able to destroy most of what's left in his deck. Alright, let's start with Compromise so we guarantee... I guess it's not quite a guarantee. Oh no, it is. So now we guarantee get rid of Spitfire and whatever else is left in his deck. And, alright. We have entered the fatigue part of the game. The late game, if you will. I don't think we have any more guaranteed knowledge on his hand other than what's intel here. We sent back that finish plane early in the game. Could be another one of those. I almost want to, like, trade here just so there's no targets. Like, I don't think I want units on the board just in case he has some weird salvage stuff. I could also just trade both of these now and leave Raiding Brigade up. There's no reason not to trade both of these now, and then we'll just pass back the turn. So now he's drawing into 4 fatigue. Alright. So he does get to salvage the guy. Our last card is Phony War, so that means if we play to the last man, this game should be as good as over. Because for him to present any additional threat on the board to kill B before he dies to fatigue requires him to empty cards out of his hand, which means that this Phony War will draw us 3 cards, so we will draw 2, 3, 4. So we are going to take 9 damage, and it will draw him 4 cards, and that will absolutely kill him. So we take 2, 3, 4. He draws 7, 8, 9, or 6, 7, 8, 9. End turn. Pass back to him. He draws into 10. And this was a shockingly close game with him developing into a second copy of the take a card and put both of them onto the independent. The unexpected interception to stop the honor and loyalty. So he was able to, just like through like random stuff that you're not really normally expecting, was able to deny 1 forced draw. Well, he was able to deny 1 forced draw and then deny a second forced draw and then force me to draw. And after all of that, we were still enough ahead of him on fatigue that we were able to comfortably use fatigue as the win condition of this deck. So even though what he was playing is on a standard deck, that does show the standard way that this deck operates into control decks, which is to say, just sort of absorb pressure. Like, there were several times throughout that game where he just had a massive, massive board advantage, but he was not really able to turn board advantage into any meaningful damage to my HQ through all of that healing. Mulliganing against the US is difficult because, like, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be some sort of heavy ramp deck with, like, Yank, maybe Brit ally, maybe French ally with Throp stuff. And then, like, 10% of the time it's going to be, like, US-Japan hyper aggro. So you have to mulligan accordingly. I think we will send back the independent. Keep honor and loyalty just in case there is a really big guy early in the game, and then keep 77th just because he's a solid dude to play. This is a very solid hand. Obviously, if he starts, like, getting us with an L640, could become a bit problematic, but he's more likely going to play War Machine, and if he plays War Machine, we basically win the game. Because there is very little way for Ramp to create enough threats to get through all of this removal, and there is absolutely no way that Ramp is going to somehow get ahead of us in fatigue. The main thing Ramp is able to do is, if it's able to get enough damage out with its stuff, if I play 77th, I can compromise on 4. Do I want to compromise on 4? No, I can't even compromise on 4. It makes it easier to compromise on potentially on 5 if I draw a 1-drop. I think we do play it. Against Ramp, there's no reason. Like, it's so favored unless they're able to just, like, get in, you know, the 12 damage from B-24Ds and then 12 damage from nukes and then, like, 12 damage from Bomber Mafias into more B-24Ds. Unless they're able to do all of that, it's usually a pretty straightforward game. I mean, I'm scared of Catalina attacking me in the face, but also, like, Catalina draws him a card a turn. I mean, drawing him one card a turn isn't actually that great. Very good thing about Catalina is it draws 2 cards, and then you put 1 back, which is a net 1 card a turn for, like, fatigue purposes. However, if your hand is full, you draw 2 cards, and you'll overdraw the second, and then have to put 1 back. So you're still, it's still actually destroying cards in your deck. Japan ally for diplomatic attaché. That's weird. Does make me a little afraid of how much burn he might have in this deck. Also makes me wonder that if he's going to be able to just race me. If he's able to dump cards from his hand very quickly. So I almost want to honor and loyalty Catalina here. We could instead just play it slow. The fact that he traded last turn makes me think he'll probably trade here again. Or maybe like second Calliope attack this. Again, you can afford to play this deck very slowly. So he's going to go for the second Calliope attack. Is he going to like War Machine? Gunship. What is this deck? I could double honor and loyalty the Calliopes. It pushes him up to 9, and then he will overdraw 3 cards, which is pretty good. The fact that we have all 4 honor and loyalties in our hand already, I am just going to toss out 2 of them. I don't love giving him the Calliope deployment effect again for just 2 damage to my face, but I do love overdrawing him 3 cards. America at War is a terrible overdraw. War Bonds is a terrible overdraw. War Bonds is a terrible overdraw. Alright, we managed to overdraw all of his card draw. Great. Okay. Calliope number 3. This was not one that was shuffled into his deck. Aichi Gunship Mission. Okay, this is actually becoming problematic. Everything is able to attack me from the support line. So let's start with a compromise. We are, like, absolutely annihilating his deck at the moment. Try to get rid of this Aichi just so there's nothing that's going to stick through a board clear, and also so we don't give him another Calliope deployment effect. War Machine is a terrible overdraw. Grasshopper might be a good overdraw. War Machine is a terrible overdraw. Okay, so every card in his hand is really annoying, and every card in his deck is somehow, like, the most meaningless cards in this matchup. Another Gunship Mission. Okay, that's all 4 Gunship Missions. Imperial Strike. It's just like a burn ramp, and I'm somehow milling his draw and ramp, and not his burn. This is kind of ridiculous. Okay, so let's Phony War, and we'll drop the 4th Honor and Loyalty on the Calliope. There's pretty reasonable chance he will overdraw it, because he's getting another 4 overdraws here. They can't all be terrible. Okay, Diplomatic Attaché. That's huge. That's going to limit how much total burn he can do with those. Empire of the Sun is a terrible overdraw. America War is a terrible overdraw. And, okay, we've... Really? Really? This is insane. This is, like, absolutely insane. Imperial Strength, Calliope draw, and America at War to not draw a card. Okay, we do need to start removing units because we're taking a lot of damage. Let's see what we draw on compromise here. We pick up to the last man, so that's going to definitely make me reconsider using one of these credit denial cards. I'm honestly considering just playing compromise here. It forces overdraw on 3 more cards. And we are going to overdraw as well. But, like, we are so far ahead on fatigue that this is not going to... Value is not even going to be a consideration. It is just going to be, do we survive what's left in his deck? And I need to get rid of burn cards. That Calliope, Strategic Bombing. Okay, we finally get good overdraws. That is 7 damage not going to the face. Diplomatic Attaché number 2 and 3. Aichi. I was really hoping we would get rid of Aichi. I was about to say, if we could pick up a second Fody War, we actually could just, like, aggro burn him. Unfortunately, that's not what has happened. Okay, we drop to the last man. We take 3 damage from Aichi. Hopefully he doesn't have a second one. It's just the only alternative is playing Desperate and commit the reserves, and then we're not playing to the last man for, like, several turns. So we have to start with to the last man, because we're now probably going to be going under credits. And here is where he's just going to start nuking. So this is 15. Okay, I think he has a Calliope, so we want to get a unit down now. I don't think he's going to burn us 7 without nukes. So I kind of want to get an independent to the front line to be more easily able to answer stuff. I think we're going to do ALS, try to find another compromise. Kurume is good. And we're going to get the healing, because he hasn't played any production orders, and he might just not run it, but like if he has production order, play, go face, Imperial Strength, that's 8 damage from hand. Okay. Kurume does save us. The alternative is we do out the mist, commit the reserves. So that's 4 credits. We get one of the we discard a card. We get 2 3-cost Takasakis to hand. We replay 1. That's 7 credits. Kurume 9 credits. So we discard 2 cards from his hand. And stop him from double nuking. That actually seems really good. Okay, that's an absolutely atrocious discard. That accomplishes nothing. I guess I could have discarded 2 cards this turn to increase the chances it discards nukes. If I do out the mist, commit the reserves, play out the mist, Kurume. Oh, we discard the second nuke. That's massive. And then we pick up another compromise. Can we afford to play it? Like, I can fully remove Aichi. I think actually just playing compromise here is better. Again, just out of fear of that B24D. And we'll get an independent to the front line. Stop any, like, Hellcat shenanigans. Also just have a thing that's going to be able to hit stuff in his support line now. And he surrenders. Okay. Absolutely crazy game. Absolutely crazy game, but another win. And that is the win for 400 Japan. Elite wildcard. At the level 50. At the level 50 intervals, like they all should be. 150. Looking at you. Alright, we get to see the new track. Basically the same as the old one. But yeah, now let's get into a third game, and hopefully we'll get into a game against more recognizable decks, because I have no idea what the last 2 decks have been. Alrighty, Germany, and I'm gonna assume Germany, France, but like, again, I don't know, it's gonna be like German, Poland countermeasures or some nonsense. Not gonna keep Takasaki, just because they probably wanted like 3 or 4 suppression. We're gonna keep a compromise, we're gonna keep an honor and loyalty. Gonna mulligan the other 3. Hopefully get some, what are they, the 78ths? Okay, Buzz Bomb face. Looks like Ger France. That's going to be great. You know, not an amazing hand here, but not terrible. The reason you keep honor and loyalty, specifically against Germany, is you need to get rid of Sabua on turn 3, and you'd much rather auto and loyalty it than hit it with a commit the reserves on turn 3. Like, Sabua later in the game is kind of fine, but it's specifically, like, they can snowball really hard if they have it immediately. Jaeger Regiment on the Whirlwind. Interesting. So, like, our deck is entirely built around forcing our opponents to draw cards. So, given an opportunity like this to make our opponent draw a card is very, very good, obviously. But there is always a consideration against aggro decks where it's like, if you go second and their hand size looks so small, you always think to yourself, maybe if I don't draw them cards, I'll just be able to, like, run them out of cards in hand with, like, the regular control stuff. It never works. It absolutely never works. You are always baiting yourself if you think that that is going to work. But it is always, like, a consideration. I'm thinking about which of these I want to hit. Health is a very important... Like, health is... Against Germany, France, health is the most important resource. So I wonder if we just save ourselves health by making this trade. Like, what's the punish for this sticking around? There's not much of one. I don't know. If we do this, like, next turn we could... Well, we can't really compromise next turn, but next turn we could call to the colonies trade. Alright. If he has Blitzkrieg, we're probably just dead. Not a whole lot we can change about that. And he goes for the Doctrine. Okay. He takes the pedal off of the metaphorical metal here. Oh, okay. KFC's really annoying. At least it stays one attack. That's an interesting draw. Not a lot we can do with it just yet, so we will still drop the Independent. But yeah, this is kind of worst case scenario so far. Our opponent's gone first, had a hyper-aggressive hand, and is now curving into Doctrines. So we'll probably want to... Oh, he picked that so fast. Okay, this is an interesting situation. Can we fully remove the front line? This is 3, this is free, 4, 5. Yeah, we can definitely fully remove the front line. We can even jam something into the front line after that. And then what? He probably has, like, a blitz tank. Like a big blitz tank. Alright, I think we have to just get rid of his stuff. Alright. Dragons, salvaging dragons is perfectly fine. We can just toss it up to the front line to slow him down a bit. I'm hoping that I can hold off this being traded until after we get a Phony War off. We might not be living to that point. 77th here is a great draw. Do we ever toss Independent to the front line here? Or do we compromise? Might be time to compromise. I might be trying to greed too hard with compromising after Phony War. Um, do I want to throw this into the front line? I think I'd rather have it in hand. Okay, let's do this. This might bait out his suppression as well, because he wants to empty out his hand. And if he suppresses any suppression he plays not on Kurume or Takasagi, he wants to draw with the suppression. I don't think Buddy has quite got the message just yet as to what's going on here. Okay, so we're probably... Blade or Honor and Loyalty? This is like a fine Blade. I kind of want to hold off on Dragons just because I might give him a Crossfire. Yeah, let's just do this. Okay, we pick up another compromise. That's huge. Sensor Store back into the Shadow Realm. And we mill... Is that Dragon's number 4 that we overdrew? And Comet. Okay, huge, huge hit. You can beat this deck through Comet. Like, you absolutely can beat this deck through Comet, where they just hit you with the Comet every single turn, and you just heal out of it and kill them with fatigue draws. But in this position where he was able to get in so much early damage, Overdrawing Comet is massive, because now it is just a question of dealing with what's in his hand. Alright, here come the Fridas, but without Comet, the air superiority, or the air support, the tier 3 of the Fridas. Not that useful. Drop in another Buzz Bomb. Bold choice. I don't think we can afford to compromise here. No. Surely that we'll draw into something that lets us stop this. And also just destroying his deck. Like, if we can get the second Doctrine, we are absolutely chilling. I'm gonna go for the Independent. I know it's like a little wasteful, but again, we're just like trying to overdraw him as many cards as possible. Okay, Arado's fine. Another Frida's huge. Definitely not nearly as impactful as Second Doctrine, but fine. Okay, that's third Frida. And he makes an 8-8, which is gonna hurt, but, you know, we're gonna survive through it pretty easily. Especially with Comet gone. Make it a 10-10. And drops a card out of his hand. So I'm thinking of doing ALS for Compromise. Because we don't actually have to Blade it. We can Independent and 58th it. Call to the Colonies is a card I will take. Because I just kind of want to get off of 8 health. So, we're going to Call to the Colonies, kill his 10-10. We're not overdrawing him something, so he might have a second Doctrine. He also has double Panzer Grenadiers and the Return to Hand card. He probably is finding it difficult to have hand space to play the Panzer Grenadiers. Which is useful. 22nd Infantry. Are you sure you want to play that? I guess it's the only way to get room here for the Panzer Grens. Arado makes a 6-6. So Arado has to die. Okay, this turn is very straightforward. Do I have the credits for that? I don't have the credits for that. Well, I think we actually leave Arado up here. No, I should have just took the last man. This was a mistake. This was a mistake. There's, like, certainly no way that he's killing me from hand on an empty board here. Like, we're not dying this turn, either, but it gives him a way to play out the air supports, which are very difficult for him to get out of his hand. The late's just in the deck. So this is 3-7 Samua. Is he not playing air? Like, presumably he's playing a single air support. Attack phase, attack phase. This goes to 0 off attack phase. So we can drop to the last man. We can also honor and loyalty Errado. Drop Bonsai. Hold on to the last man. I think we want to do this to decrease the odds of him finding Panzer Grenadier's bounce, because I think that's the only thing that kills us this turn. Actually, he might just, like, have enough blitz stuff with Werbles. He's out of Whirlwinds. Panzer H. So fine, overdraw. Obviously would have liked to see the second Panzer gun. So he's played at least 135T. He's out of Werbles. Panzergren is 5 damage. So if it's Panzergren and 35T, restore Panzergren number 2. This is not lethal, because he only has 1 Doctrine off. We're at 1 health. Alright, Compromise or To the Last Man. Compromise is surely the better play here. Yeah, we pick up the Honor and Loyalty. Not quite enough. We need to ALS into second Honor and Loyalty or Compromise. Commit the reserves is fine. And by fine, I mean really good, to be clear. We'll send this back. And I don't think pushing to the front line accomplishes anything. I could play it. I guess I should have played it just in case. If we need it next turn, it's 1 credit saved, and if we don't need it next turn, it probably doesn't matter. Alright, goes for the Doctrine, finds. Actually, would it have just been immediate lethal if he got... I don't think it would have been immediate lethal with the Panzer JL. 35T, is it just double 35T for lethal? Nope. Okay, if we To the Last Man, we can't take the front line, so we're almost certainly dead to one of the 2 developed tanks in his hand. If we Phony War, what's the out? Like, stringing compromises. But do we have enough credits for that? I think this is... I think we have to go for this line. Ooh, no healing. Okay, we're just dead if he has... Alright, well, we can clear the board still. We're dead to blitz tanks. This was a unfortunate game. Very close one, but we are going to die. We got the Comet, but we didn't get any of the Doctrines or either of the Panzer Grenadiers. And how many... Yeah, he did have the L. How many compromises? are left in the deck. We still have 1 in the deck. Yeah. We just weren't quite able to stabilize, but if we look at how low our opponent was, that was a very close game. So yeah, that, you know, Joe France is, I think, still a favorite matchup. And, you know, it's obviously upsetting to lose game number 3 in the recording, but I think it is still a favorite matchup. Joe France is the one that is the hardest. It is the closest fought victories, but you can actually, you know, if you go first and they're not able to just keep you under constant pressure, like our opponent was, with especially hitting those dragons, back-to-back dragons, in the beginning of the game. If they're not able to, like, deal that much pressure, because you saw our opponent was able to deal, like, you know, 15 damage or so by, like, turn 6 or 7. If he didn't deal those 15 damage, like, if he was able to only deal, like, 5 damage in the early game, then that game would have ended with, like, he wouldn't have been able to kill us with the Blitz tanks, and then to the last man, the Blitz tanks he plays onto the board, and then he just dies in fatigue. So that is an incredibly close game. Now our opponent is Soviets. I don't think Kurome is really particularly useful here. So I think we'll just keep raiding Brigade, and maybe Honor and Loyalty just in case, you know, they get out like a 4th Guards quickly or something like that. And then Raid Brigade is just good for Fiats or Engineers, or the likes. If this is Soviet control, this is just going to be like a free win. Soviet control is probably like the freest of the wins. It is honestly distressing how free it is. We have 3 Honor and Loyalty, we're just going to drop it, fill his hand size. It's difficult for him to get cards out of his hand, and this lets us compromise on curve. Our opponent's about to have an absolutely miserable experience. Brit ally. Okay, so he's got to have a lot of health. And you know, if he finds front formation, it will be a marginally closer game. Bloody Sickle, worst overdraw in his deck. Enemy contact, also absolutely useless. It might be push OTK. You don't have Great Patriotic War anymore. If it is push OTK, this game's over. Do I just like slam an independent to the front line? Probably. Yeah, the front formation, like, you'd think front formation just kills you, but they just can't do it fast enough, and you get, like, these annoying little guys in the way. Like, you know, I played against Soviet Italy where they play front formation on turn 9, and I still killed them in fatigue faster. I think I'm just going to compromise hit out of the mist. We do overdraw a card. If I draw a way to not overdraw, I might play that instead. We don't, so let's just commit to this line, and we overdraw the front formation. This game's not even going to be close. Our opponent might surrender now. It would probably be pretty valid. And the 4th Guards. Okay. It's over. This is a pretty feels-good game. This game is definitely making up for the very close-fought game against Germany-France. Alright. We'll just send this guy back. Glamour Boys is a good overdraw. First Responders prevents the 2nd overdraw. I'm not really sure what his game plan is. Yeah, KV's a little scary. I almost want to save On the Ascent to On the Ascent the 488th just for more overdraw. That might be getting a little silly with it, but okay, Doubting System is a good one to see go. I hate the random countermeasures. Oh, we're actually going to get some nasty On the Ascent value on 1. I kind of don't want his 97th, but it could turn up to be useful. Just don't play like an Engineers, please. Alright, let's see what he overdraws next turn. And we'll toss these guys out of our hand, just to make room. Overdraws an 8/45th. Train. Yeah, this guy's reached the point where he's just like, well, I'm gonna die in fatigue in, like, 10 turns, so I might as well just, like, hand dump all of my threats onto the board and hope he doesn't have an AoE. Oh, MI5. We don't have a Phony War in our hand, but we do have this ALS, which is going to be useful. Maybe I can pick up a compromise here. Phony War is probably the pick here, just because we don't have the hand refill at the moment, and if we take anything else, we could risk just running out of cards. I could drop a commit the reserves. I don't think we need to. We're not under any threat of damage at the moment. Okay. Just plays out the Stalin. Probably what he picked off of the Heroes of the Soviet Union, if I had to guess. I mean, just like commit the reserves, pass. We drew one of our Phony Wars naturally, so I'm almost tempted to play this now. Maybe Kurame. Like, we're so far ahead on fatigue that I'm fine drawing myself 3 cards. We basically just played an old mobilization. Man, I'm still just thinking about back to that German France or the German France game. I think I trolled the game. On the turn I didn't play to the last man. I think I had played to the last man there. Maybe I won that game. So yeah. That was a play. Okay, I guess just played Takasagi. Like, he's doing everything he can to avoid overdrawing cards. But you know, there's a point where you have to ask yourself, is playing strategic focus to nuke your own board better than not doing that, for example? Alright. I think we're gonna drop the 77th. Hold on to the Rain Brigade for an Engineers. Just because Engineers is such an annoying card to get rid of. I mean, it's not gonna actually matter because Fund Formation got overdrawn. Alright, Frontline's the train. Desperate Measures could also Phony War here. Get some more overdraws. And yeah, let's just get rid of some cards. And we'll drop the ALS because we're on 12 credits. Upgrade KV. Is that a... Didn't I kill KV? Am I crazy? No, I honor and loyalty to the KV. That's true. Whoa, huge turn here. Tractor Factory's turning point. It's gonna push 10 damage. Drop us to 35. And play a Yak 7. Well, like, you know, I played to the last man, I win. I played Desperate Measures, clean up the board, I win. I'm just trying to figure out if there's any way I can, like, keep Yak alive somehow, just to force the overdraw more. But, obviously I don't need to. And let's play a simple game here. We are 10 ahead in fatigue, sitting on another force draw in hand. Alright. And our opponent is on fatigue. It's, what, like turn like 15 or something? And there it goes. So, yeah. I think that's all the games I will include here. But, yeah, I think that sort of showcases the range of this deck. You know, it's able to beat the burn deck. It's able to beat weird control that you don't necessarily know what they're playing, that has a lot of, like, sort of like, cards that are particularly good into this deck. It's able to absolutely annihilate Soviet control. And the game against Joe France, like, you know, it was a rough start, and it came incredibly close, and I maybe could have won the game if I didn't make a mistake on the deck. So yeah, that's sort of the absolute craziness of this deck. Maybe I'll queue up a couple of other games actually, and you know, see if I can get into a Aggro. So you know, if the video doesn't end here, that's because I queued into a Aggro match just to show off what the Aggro match looks like. Alrighty, it's not Japan, but you know, maybe it's going to be a potential rematch against Joe France, and maybe I'll include that if that is the case. This is like a pretty solid hand, if it is Joe France. So let's keep it. If it's, I haven't actually played this against discard, so turn 1 Jaeger Regiment. So like, obviously he's playing 35T on 2. That is very annoying for us, the fact that he had to Jaeger without anything on it. Maybe we've played against this guy before, and he knows that I'm discard. Or, not discard, he knows that I'm mill. Pass? Push? Frida. Okay, that makes marginally more sense. We'll get rid of it. So it almost certainly is Joe France. And if that is the case, this hand is looking very good. He gets the draw with the errado. 35T without anything to buff it, and now we can compromise on 4. Which is what you kind of want to be doing in this deck. Like, at any point, if you can compromise without overdrawing a card, and without getting, like, smacked for, like, you know, a ton of damage on the board, almost always it is the correct play. Like, you know, it doesn't overdraw our opponent a single card, but it gets us deeper into our deck, and it gets our opponent's hand size larger. I don't actually have a Honor and Loyalty in our hand at the moment, which is kind of annoying. So I think I'll just drop a second compromise and play out a 58th as is. We overdraw 96th, not that important. And overdraw Jaeger Regiment, actively bad. Alright, so pretty bad overdraws. Generally speaking, the earlier you can get overdraws in a game, the better. Because the cards that stick into your opponent's hand are going to be the cards that are expensive, and then they don't have the ability to play them, and they're going to pick their big, you know, game-winning cards off of stuff like Panzer H's, when they get, like, the opportunity to do so. They'll also be more willing to draw cards until they have the big stuff into their hand already. Okay, so there's an absolutely massive dude. We could just 588th or 388th. This seems pretty straightforward. He overdraws a card, gets rid of the massive guy. It still doesn't deal with Samua, but you know, as we draw more cards, we're more likely to find Honor and Loyalty. 22nd overdraw is hilariously bad. Okay, second Samua. That is an issue. I mean, as soon as he sends a Samua to the front line, we can deal with it. And also, as soon as we draw an Honor and Loyalty, we can deal with it. Still nothing. I'm thinking about just Kurume, toss a 388 to the front line. Like, I'll probably be able to, like, you know, value trade it somehow at this point. Like a 35T kills. Sure. Make a 3-4 dragons. Maybe he sacks the errata into it at this point. Because he doesn't have any follow-up, it looks like, for the dragons. That's a interesting play. Is he gonna hit it? Like, is he gonna hit this with errata or the other Samua? The other Samua. So now we can clear the Samuas relatively easily. We can't clear the errata. But such is life. He can make it a 9 or a 7-6. And, like, we're gonna find an Honor and Loyalty eventually. I don't think this is beating me down too much. If he's, like, gonna suppression the 20th to go face, that's fine. Okay, Dragon's number 2, 35T. So he can trade out, drop the air support, go face for 7. The dragons, pushing the dragons has left him in a bit of an awkward position where I just am going to farm guards if he doesn't either kill this with errata or suppression it. In either situation, we come out on top. He does choose to drop the suppression. That's really good for us. 1 out of probably 3. Gone. Impressively, still no answer for this, but compromise should find us a either. Nope. Still nothing. I'm going to just drop a second 77. Got another guard up here. Okay, this is kind of impressive. We managed to not draw any Honor and Loyalties or commit the reserves or Blade of the Samurai. Not that we would have had credits to play Blade of the Samurai if we drew it off of Compromise last turn, but it would be pretty good on the following turn. On the other hand, we are at 31 health, so, you know, I'm not too worried. Panzer H raw in the deck. Interesting. Alright, it's looking like it's air, land, and sea time because we somehow don't have an answer, but this should virtually guarantee us an answer. Not the answer I was hoping for in Honor and Loyalty, but I will take a Blade of the Samurai. And we'll toss both guys up to the front line. We're not going to get the value out of it another 20th, because he takes this trade, but it does slow him down, and he's probably not running the Blitz Schützen. He's yet to show Comet and yet to play Doctrines, so hopefully we can overdraw those. Well, we'll probably almost certainly not overdraw all of those, and he'll probably have a fair amount in his hand already. But hopefully we can overdraw at least one of those. Oh, don't play another unit. Okay, thank you. Oh, now we draw the Honor and Loyalty, though. Which is annoying. Now here's the question. Do we preemptively play the Independent? Or do we sit back and be a bit more reactive? I think we play it a bit more reactive. We have the Honor and Loyalty finally. We just sit back and do nothing. Like, you know, he can develop some Doctrines. It's fine. Doubles your store. and Warble. So this is getting sent back for sure. And then we'll probably push an independent. He can suppress it to avoid the draw, but if he suppresses it, he gets the draw anyways. This is a really annoying hand. We'd love to pick up a Phony War soon. We have one compromise left, I think. Yep. Alright, getting a ton of value out of the second Algerians. Panzer H number 3. Just hard runs 3 Panzer H's. Kind of crazy. And we find the Phony War. Okay, so what's happening? Kurume is definitely coming out. I think probably just Kurume. He, of course, can still suppress this, but... Honor and Loyalty is going to come out on the Zerstorer. We've also picked up to the last man now, so we're much safer. Overdraw Arado, still not that great. Again, looking for Doctrines, looking for Comet. Although maybe he doesn't... Well, I mean, Panzer H... You know, okay, we overdraw Frida number 3. So that's good. He's probably going to start with suppressing this. Yep, suppression number 2. Comet was the top deck, and that's going to let him get 13 damage in with pushing up these guys. The Jaeger Comet? Oh, he wants to keep Algerians back. He Jaegered Panzer 4. Interesting. Probably looking like a compromise here. Alternatively, I could out the mist my Kurume and then play to the last man. This forces the draw from him. We haven't seen the Panzergrens yet, but we are keeping him at a hand size where a Panzergren is going to be a little difficult. And if he just goes for the Comet here, that's way too slow. Okay, that makes room for the Panzergrens. Yep. We can just do Compromise Bonsai, because this will be 4-4. And there's the Doctrine. Man, is this, like, hand just going to be Doctrine, Doctrine, Panzergren, Panzergren, Comet? We just didn't overdraw any of those. Okay, get the draw and the heal in. We'll ALS, because we're on 12 credits. Ooh. This is actually tough. Honor and Loyalty does bump up the clock. I think we take Takasagi, though. Just because he's played 2 suppressions. That also means we have 2 Takasagis in the deck, so that's 3 total Takasagis. Which all have a chance of discarding Comet. Also, if they don't discard Comet, they might bait out a suppression. They might just slow down Comet. Has to hit it with other stuff. And last but not least, it's going to get rid of cards out of his hand for potential Phony War lethal bursts. Alright. Zerstores. Both of them come back. And let's just play out both of these guys. With 2 Zerstores on the board, it basically means suppression draws a card now. And we're also making room for, we might just preemptively Phony War if we need more draws. Dragons. This does mean he can crossfire now. Panzergren number 2. Okay, his hand's getting pretty small. There's a pretty high chance of a Comet discard if he just double trades here. If he has double suppression to go face for 14, I'm going to be a little upset. Okay, discard Panzer F. And suppression number 3 to go face for 8. Alright, this comes out, so that's 1. I can hit that, kill that. I can't touch these. But this is 6 credits, 8 credits, 9, 10 credits. So I think we do ALS. I can take Commit the Reserves to remove one of the planes. I can take Takasagi. And does that actually leave me with the credits to play both guards? No, I'm not going to have the board space to play both guards. Am I going to have the board space to play any of the guards? If I go for this. 6, 8, 9, no, actually. So we'll do this, trade here, do this, kill this. Okay, so if he has suppression, he has to suppress the Kurame if he has suppression number 4. And then trade 9 damage, and that's 9, 10, so he's 1 off lethal if he has 4th suppression. Blitzkrieg discards 22nd. Wait, what? This should have guard. Alright, well, we discovered a new bug. That is a loss to Ger France, but that is, you know, not... That's a loss only because the Kurame just didn't have guard for some reason. I'm trying to think, like, it's not even like he didn't... I killed the Kurame on my turn, so the Kurame never got suppressed. It's not like he suppressed Kurame and then I salvaged, like, the suppressed version of it. We'll take a look at his deck list. Yeah, there's only the 3 suppressions, so he had no more suppressors. What was left in his deck? Maybe a second Cuirassier? Maybe a Jaeger? Yeah, so we just absolutely won that game. I think we actually killed him that turn. Well, presumably he doesn't play Discard or Blitzkrieg if he... Well, actually, he still might play Blitzkrieg just to keep the health high on his units. And then he's what, drawing into 3 fatigue, and we phony war him for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if we find Compromise or Honor and Loyalty, that's lethal. Yeah. Well, I think we absolutely won that game without the bug. So that's unfortunate. And I think I will include that there and then end it here, because I've been looking for a Aggro game for a while, and I can't find... The one time you want to queue into Aggro. I can't find Aggro, but... Anyways, despite the fact that this deck has lost both games that I showed in the recording to Germany, France, it is actually a very good deck into Germany, France. It's absolutely competitive. I think it's favored. But it's probably the hardest matchup, I will say, that I have found of something that you're going to see regularly, because I think it's actually fairly... I think it's better into Aggro than it is into Germany, France, but I think it's good favored into both of them, and it absolutely obliterates control, which I think was also just shown pretty well in this matchup. So, yeah, that's the deck. If you want to tech it more for Germany, France, tech it more for Aggro, take out the Blade of the Samurais and put in like Out of the Mists and more of the shock guys. But I think Blades of the Samurais are going to be pretty useful even in the Germany-France things, just because, you know, sometimes they're going to be slamming down King Tigers or Bowsers or whatever. But anyways, all of that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you have the means and desire to do so, please consider donating to me down in the Ko-Fi link in the description of the video. It helps out a lot because, you know, especially with tournaments going away and casting being, you know, much more spaced out. There's not a lot of ways I can monetize this hobby of playing and producing content for cards. And if you can't, don't worry about that. Thank you very much to everybody who can and has donated already. And thank you very much for everybody for watching this video, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one.